Okay, let's start. Class number 3. So today I want to make our final discussion about what we call single species dynamics, which is what we have seen in the two first classes. So I think maybe we will not need 1 hour and a half. Let's see. It depends on how much questions we have. So let's summarize our 2 models that we have. So one model is Malthusian growth. And the other model is the logistic model. And the solution of the logistic model, I should take it from somewhere here. Can't remember. Where's the logistic? It's K 1 plus K minus N0 divided by N0 e to minus RT. Okay? And graphically, this was like this, T and N. So this is just exponential growth, and this is logistic growth. You have a specific value here, which is K. So you start here, you increase, and you go asymptotically to K. That's what we have seen, okay? So first of all, let me notice that when you have more complicated dynamics or not so simple things, could be that, for instance, I have made a plot here. Okay? In order to do a plot, I have to put numbers. Okay? So numbers, which means that I have to give a number for N0 and R to make a plot. Okay? But in this very simple case, it is obvious that all the plots have the same aspect. They start at N0 and increase exponentially. Okay? Maybe they can increase slower or faster, depending on the value of R. But essentially, it's always the same thing. Okay? And the same is true for the logistic equation. Okay? So again, I would have to put N0, R, and K in order to make a plot. But essentially, I forgot that if you start above K, then you decrease here. Okay? Essentially, you start at N0, whatever N0 you have. Here you have 2 cases, above K or below K. And then here you increase and you go asymptotically to K. So even if in order to do an actual plot, I have to put a value for K in order to put it on a computer, you need numbers. Okay? So you can do this here just qualitatively, and it's always the same story. So it's very simple. It could be that in certain more complicated models, that would not be true. It would be if the parameter is, I don't know, below a certain value, then you have one behavior. If a certain parameter is below or above a certain value, then you have a different behavior. This can happen, and it will happen when you have, we will see this when we discuss predator-prey and competition models, which are models that are not single species, but are models that are 2 species, and that will be our topics in the near future. So, okay, so now here everything was very simple. Now I want to draw a new plot, okay? So, because remember, here we have the solution. If you have the solution, you kind of have everything, in the sense that you have a solution that is not valid only for a certain k or a certain r. It's valid for any r and any k. So it's a complete solution somehow. It is for any k and any r, you have this function. Okay? So that is very exceptional. I mean, this will be our, yeah, I think it's the only case that we will have in this course where you have this solution. Okay? Normally, you won't have it. Well, then you can group. You go to Renato's course, he will show you how to solve equations numerically and obtain the graph, the plots, and so on. Okay? But we will here do something else. But in order to do something else, let's first make a plot of this. dn dt, notice that this is not anymore n, it is the derivative of n, in terms of n. Okay? So, for Malthus, this is just a straight line going to the origin. And this inclination here depends on r. Okay? So this is Malthus. Now, here, for this, you can write it in the more explicit way here. You have a second order polynomial, okay, also going through 0. Right? So, okay, let me just notice why most of the cases you will have things that go through 0. In order to not go to the origin, you would have to have a complete polynomial with some constant here. Okay? Say you had it. Okay? Why can't you have a constant here? Some idea. Ah, okay, the mic.
It would mean that somehow the population is increasing or decreasing based on a factor that is not related to the population itself. Maybe migration could be something.
Well, could be migration, yeah, okay. Yeah, then you have, but if for closed population, that would mean spontaneous generation, actually, okay? So unless you are doing things like migration, okay, well, good remark. If you have something coming from outside at a constant rate, okay? Otherwise, this means that there would be spontaneous generation, okay? Because why? Because if you say, I don't have any, n is equal to 0, okay? Let's say n is equal to 0, okay? You don't have any individual. And then you look at dn dt. Will n increase or decrease? So if you have a c here and there's a positive, that would mean that even if you put 0, 0 here, you have an increase of the population without having any individual. Okay, so can only be migration or spontaneous generation, okay? But we are taking the cases with no migration, okay? So you can't have this. And once you don't have this, if you have no individuals, n is equal to 0, you put 0 here, and dn dt is also 0, means that the population stays constant equal to 0, which is what you expect. Okay? So, okay, so it's a parabola. Okay? So if you think a little bit how's the form of this parabola, it's not very difficult to draw. It's something which will be like this. Okay? And so, okay, let me redraw. I don't want Malthus to stay here. Okay, it's no matter. So this is for the, it goes to 0 here. This is logistic. Now, let's look at the point where dn dt is equal to 0 on the line. So one point is 0, right? And the other point is n equal to k. You can look it from here. It's easier. So n is equal to k. This is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Therefore, dn dt is 0. So the point where this parabola crosses this axis here is k. Huh? So now some nomenclature. Okay? So when you have this point where dn dt is equal to 0 means what? That if the population has exactly that value, it will continue to stay with that value. Okay? Therefore, they are called fixed points. Okay? Now, let's say I'm just dumb enough not to have found the solution. Okay? I don't know the solution. Okay? Because see, look at this good thing. With this, I will show you how you could come to the conclusion that the system would increase and saturate and come to a fixed point equal to k without doing any calculation, or almost no calculation. Right? So this is the derivative, isn't it? So the derivative is positive, which is the case here, but not. I mean, you could go on here, yeah, not here, but in this, from 0 up to k, the derivative is positive. Therefore, the population will increase because the derivative is positive. Okay? And I will. So now think I'm sitting on the fixed point n equal to 0. And I do, and that's the name that we will talk a lot about. I do a small perturbation. That is, I introduce a very small population. And then I want to know what will happen to this small population. Will it stay close to the fixed point, or will it go away from the fixed point? So this is the concept intuitively, not written down mathematically, but intuitively of what are stable or unstable fixed points. So, okay, say instead of being here at 0, I'm introduce a small population here, just near the 0. Okay. Then I look at this point, and I look at here, and I see that for this any value here, dn dt is positive. Therefore, n will increase. Therefore, it will increase and go away from the 0 point, the point 0. Okay? So any small population I introduce near the fixed point n equal to 0 will increase. Therefore, it will go this way. N will increase. Okay? Now, let us look at the second fixed point. The second fixed point is n equal to k. Let me introduce a small population to the left. Here. The derivative dn dt, which corresponds to the small population, is positive. Therefore, this thing goes this way. But say I have introduced a population which is on the right of k. The derivative is negative. Therefore, this points in this way. It means that at the end, the population, if you perturb the fixed point n equal to k, if you perturb it, it will go to k. And that's actually what we have here. But here we have it because we have the expression. But I don't need expression to come to the conclusion that 0 is an unstable fixed point, a population will increase and go to k. Because it's the only thing it can do. It has to increase here. Okay? It increases slower and slower because, you see, here it's decreasing. dn dt has the maximum here, and then dn dt gets smaller and smaller, means that you are in this region here, where you increase slower and slower. Okay? So it goes there until the point that dn dt is equal to 0, you arrive at k. Okay? And if you perturb k to the right or to the left, the derivative, the function is such that the k, the small perturbation, will fade away and will go back to the value k. Okay? So that's a fixed, that's a stable fixed point, and that's an unstable fixed point. And this is what we call this, the most elementary example of what we call qualitative analysis, qualitative analysis for differential equations. Okay, so what is qualitative analysis about? Is I don't know how to solve the solution, so I have analytically. So I have two options. I go for the numerical part. You can do this, as you will learn with Renato and so on, how to solve equations with numerical. But numerical solutions need values for k, for r. It's only numbers, not abstractions when you do numerical. Yeah? But if your system is still simple enough, you can try, instead of numerical, qualitative analysis. And then you can know that the dynamics that is implied by this equation is an increase from any, if you start below k, you will increase and go to k. And if you start above k, you will decrease and go to k. So this could happen even if you had a very complicated thing. You could have, something here, some ripples. You had a very weird, say you had something weird here. Okay? But it would be still true. Okay? So changing a little bit the equation, okay? A little bit, because if you change too much, then it's different. Changing a little bit the equation. This is the result would still not be the same function. But at the end of the day, you would get to k, to the point where you cross here. Okay? So you would be, this is what we can think about, a kind of different stability. Here we have stability of fixed points, but here we do a perturbation not of the fixed point. If I do a perturbation of the equation, I have a different equation, and I do the plot, and I get something with some ripples here, or something weird. Still, you would have a different solution, but you would, at the end of the day, go to k. Okay? So that's kind of what people think about, like structural stability of the system. Okay, because you could also ask, okay, maybe my equation is not exactly this one, but there's some other term that is small and that you neglected. Maybe instead of n over k, you would also have some n squared over some other constant. Could be. And then you just say, okay, I think this term is not important, and therefore I stay with the logistic. But you could also ask the question, if I have something else here, okay, which is not very big compared to already what I have, will the properties that I have derived for this equation still be the same? And in this case, they are. Okay? Unless you perturb in such a big way, and then I have different things. Okay, so that's the qualitative. Yeah. Whereas actually this mic is a mess. Yeah, they have to insist a little bit with it. No. No, it's dead. It's on, yes. Yeah. Okay, give me this one, and we in order. Let's put it here, and get it retired.
I'm kind of confused what Malthus said, because there's a model which is like observed and expected. And it's a linear equation.
I can speak a little bit louder. I have some problems.
I'm kind of confused what Malthus said. There's a model which is like observed and expected, and there's a linear equation which is like the observed, it's the y line.
No, it's statistical model you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not a mathematical model.
Got it. And about the qualitative analysis, you're trying to say that even the perturbation, there's some habitats that can be regenerated?
No, this is just, it's much more simple. Okay, so just, again, people, you should not confuse Paulus' course with mine. This is mathematical models, deterministic. He's doing that analysis, okay, which have models, statistical models, that are assumptions you do in order to do your analysis of the data, okay? And what I'm saying is that you have, just let me answer this, okay? I'm saying just that here, what I'm trying to convince you is that you don't need this thing in order to know that the population, a small population will increase in size, and then it will saturate and go to a constant. Okay? You don't need to know the formula, the expression. You can do it graphically. Doing graphically in this case is easy. Okay? It will not be easy if you have a lot of equations. So you can also think that you could have two species, then this starts to be a little bit different because you have two species or three species, and then graphically it won't work. But for one species it works. And it's just saying that if my model is this one, then I have a population, and I have, say, no individuals of my focal population, but I introduce some, a very small amount, which is kind of when you have invasions, for instance, okay? Yeah, so it's think about an invading species, and it will go there, and it will invade, okay? But then it will somehow saturate and go to some constant value, which is implied by the logistic equation. I'm not saying that all the populations in the world do this. I mean, we discussed this, that there are lots of other patterns of stability or oscillations or whatever crazy things species do. And I'm saying that in this simplified model, where you have only the Malthusian term and the carrying capacity term, which is intraspecific competition, this will lead to a situation where you have increase and then you have go to a constant value. So your question.
It is a silly question, but I did not understand that graph fully, because dn dt is the derivative of n, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But then n is the total number of individuals in the population.
Yeah.
But in the fixed point, the total number of individuals is 0?
No, the derivative is 0. Okay? Here is n, and the fixed point is here and here. Here it's 0, but here it's equal to k. Right? This is the derivative. This is n. Okay? When you go here, n is equal to k, but n dt is 0, meaning it's fixed there because the derivative is 0. Okay.
So just to make it clear, the k is the unstable fixed point.
No, stable. K is stable.
Oh, so 0 is the
unstable.
Okay.
Because I introduce something near 0, and it goes away. It goes this direction. It doesn't go back to 0. If I introduce something small here near k, so I perturb k, say I have the population at level k, and I go there and say I kill some individuals, okay? But I let the population reproduce, go back to the, they will go in this way. Okay?
Yes. And another question. I didn't fully understand why the line crosses at k. Wouldn't it mean that the population would go beyond the carrying capacity?
No, it crosses at k because you can write down this thing, dn dt and the crossings is when dn dt is equal to 0.
Yes.
Here, okay? Put this equal to 0, and then either n is equal to 0 here, or either this term is equal to 0, which is n equal to k.
Yes.
So there's two possibilities. And it cannot cross. Why? Here, the population is increasing, okay? Then what happens is the derivative is decreasing and goes to 0, okay? So that can only approach this point. It cannot go this way because the derivative would have to be still positive. It's 0. So it cannot cross. In more complicated, not single species dynamics, but multiple species dynamics, there is something of this kind called overshooting. But overshooting is not present in this kinds of model, but single species. Okay, I didn't notice.
I don't know if this question have any sense, but what if instead of 2 fixed points we had 4? Does it have any biological sense?
Yes, and we will discuss it in the next in the next minutes.
If a population, instead of growing, is decaying, 0 can be considered a stable fixed point?
So we'll discuss the same topic with that's good. Good questions, because I see that you are thinking about in the direction I actually wanted. Okay, so I will explain this now. Okay, so now we have studied only 2 equations, which are this. This one has been derived with the hypothesis that their interspecific competition can be modeled through a carrying capacity, but the only fact that we are taking into account is interspecific competition. Okay, that's the only thing. Now, the world is complex, and there are more things. Right? So let us start with another biological fact that applies not to any population, but to some populations. which is that certain populations, when they are too small, are not viable. Now, why could a population which is small, as only some individuals, be not viable? It goes extinct. Not the species extinct, the population just. So, I want to have your opinion. Why could small populations not be viable? Has to go a long way, this mic. Yeah.
Well, the genetic variability is lesser. Don't know if I can say it this way.
Okay, genetic variability is smaller than, yeah, sure. But I mean, we are not looking at evolutionary things. But there's something on this side that can be taught. It's okay also. More biological insights. So what would make a population not be viable?
If we are talking about bottom-up regulation, maybe there's not enough food in the environment or resources in general.
So, but then this would go back to okay. So one way of a population not being viable is the resources are such that the population there's no enough nutrients. But this is a little bit different about okay. I should have formulated better my question. I said the small population are not viable, but larger populations should be viable. Okay, so this is the idea. Okay, only the small, because in your case, the big one is also not viable. Okay,
because population growth is unstable, and if you are a small population, have a small margin for error.
A small what?
A small margin for errors. So if you oscillate too much, and your population is small, it's easier to hit the ground.
Okay, so this is not exactly a biological fact, but okay, when population is small, our approximation that it can be described by a real number could not be very good. Maybe you should describe it by a random number and do stochastic dynamics. But that is not part of this program. It was last year, but we couldn't have that this year. But stochastic dynamics is about that. You describe the probability of giving birth and the probability of dying. And then there's a finite value for the probability of everybody dying at the same time. Okay? And this is increases when n is smaller and smaller, the probability that everybody dies at the same time increases. Okay, if I have only one guy, then the probability, say, is a certain value, and say 50-50, giving birth or dying. But you have two individuals, it decreases. The probability decreases a little bit, but it's still big. If you have 1 million of individuals, the probability of everybody dying at the same time will be very small. Okay? So there could be what people call stochastic effects. Okay. Yeah.
I was thinking about species that have a longer interval of reproduction, like elephants or big mammals that usually take a year to reproduce, and they have small offspring number. No, so again, this would not be connected to the smallness of the population. Okay, you could have the death rate is just bigger than the birth rate, and then you would look at Malthus' equation saying that the famous R is negative and then goes extinct. But this means that it goes extinct even if the population is large. So it's not the idea is what are the situations where the population is small
is not viable, but if it's big, then it's viable. Okay, so first you and then you. There first.
Maybe we could have endogamic depression. Endogamic depression. Maybe birth rate it's low because they don't counter it themselves. Because
okay, so you could
small.
have problems with the reproduction. So what this is true. You could have, again, if the population is small and the reproduction is sexual, there could be a good probability that there are no either females or males left. My population is entirely of females or only of males, and then it goes away. This is critical when you have a sex ratio that is not 1/2, and it's say 0.8 and 0.2. The sex ratio would be, I mean, like 0.8. And many more say females than males. Then when the population goes to small values, maybe it could be that there's no male left, and then then everything goes away. Yeah, and also endogamic things could have also this, but most of the time the phenomenon that is relevant is the reproduction. I mean, there's no either female or male left, or also the population could be dispersed in space, and there could be difficulties to find a female, to find a male, and vice versa. That could also happen. The population is dispersed, too much dispersed. Good. You.
I think I have an idea that's kind of outside maybe of the graph or the equation. But since you said that the point 0 is an unstable point, it
is
an unstable point.
No, here it's a stable. It's unstable.
The
zero,
not
the
the
zero.
k.
Okay.
If we think like that, okay, usually according to the equation, it would go up because population can be negative. But if you think biologically, if you have a really small population, any source of outside disturbance, for instance, disease, predation, or anything else, instead of making the population grow, it would instantly send them to zero.
Exactly.
Because a big disturbance would cause a great decrease in an already small number to the point that it's not viable anymore.
That's true. Small population is prone to environmental impacts. Maybe there are only 5 guys left. They are together, and the 3 guys something happens, and then you have a larger probability that it gets extinct. That's true.
Yeah, that's not considered in the equation, though.
No,
I don't
these
know if
equations.
that's
No, you want
possible.
to change these equations.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to actually change the equation. I will only change the graph, the plot. Okay, it will correspond to an equation, but okay. So more ideas. There are more things. Okay.
It's not an idea, but it's actually a question. I understood all the examples they gave, but I'm not sure if I understood what defines the viability of a population.
Why?
I'm not sure if I understood what defines the viability of a population.
What defines the variability of the population? So what we are talking is it would be genetic variability. Okay, but okay, that's more complicated because I mean, there can be many kinds of things. The simplest would be just having, and this is, you don't need to invoke really genetics. It's just having variability like male and female.
I'm sorry, it's viability. She said viability.
Viability, not variability. Viability. Viability means that the population, when it's small, if it's viable, it's able to increase. Yeah. And if it's too small, it's not viable in the sense that it will go extinct, right, locally.
I did not understand why the, like, talked about longer reproduction intervals, and you said that's on mouthes, but like because in the example of like a lack of resources, neither a small population or a big population could survive, right?
Yes, because there are no resources, then
Okay.
it's even better to be small in this case, okay?
But then if we have a species that has a longer interval of reproduction, a small population would not survive and would not be viable, but a big population would survive and be viable, right?
Yes, there are situations where you have a longer period of you have many things, for instance, with insects, that where you have not. I mean, this is something else. But for instance, with insects, you have many situations where you have non-overlapping generations. One generation, but I mean, lays the oviposits or lays the eggs in simple English, and then it dies, and then there will be the whole process, and you get a new generation, and then this new generation, well, will go on. Okay, so this is something else. Actually, we will discuss this maybe tomorrow. This is something related to what we call discrete time dynamics. You talk not about the time in terms of say hours or seconds, but you talk about the time about generations. Okay, so one other aspect that you almost mentioned, but you stopped short, is also that there are species that have group behavior. Right? So there are species that a large number of individuals cannot be preyed easily, okay? Whereas if the number of individuals is small, a predator has much more, has a higher probability of preying them, and eventually it will be eaten completely, okay? So group behavior, defensive group behavior, can be important to fight predators. So, and this you see a lot with birds and fishes. Right? You have large groups of fishes, and comes a shark, but it cannot destroy the population with so many. Right? If it would be only one or two, a small population, then it would go extinct. So this is one group behavior. And also, there's also hunting behaviors, and sometimes hunting has to have a minimum number of collective hunting from here we're speaking animals, okay? Collective hunting is you need a group, and then there's a minimal size of the group, otherwise success is not enough to overcome the death rate. Okay, you.
Well, I just have a question. I don't understand. I don't think I understood perfectly what you were saying, because you were talking about group behavior, right? And you were asking about what would make a population that is small to remain constant.
Go to zero.
Or go to zero, okay. Because I thought you were comparing this to a larger population varying a lot, right? But wouldn't group behavior help with keeping the population stable to not change the amount of population because now you have a defensive mechanism that help not change.
But sometimes you have to have a minimum number of the group. That's the point. Group behavior, you need a group. And sometimes the group has to be large enough in order to, for instance, not be preyed upon by some predator or something. Okay? So maybe, is this a defensive? It's exactly what you said. But sometimes it's not enough to have just a few individuals. You have to have a large group.
Yes, but...
Therefore, the large population is viable, and the small population is not viable.
Oh, okay.
The large one is. Okay? And the same thing can be with, say, offensive. Could be with hunting behavior, or in order to you need a group in order to be successful in preying upon your prey. Okay? So, okay, now, well, we saw there are many situations where you can actually have this the fact that you need a minimum population. Now, we could try to write an equation for that, but let's stay still in the framework of single species. I don't want to make a model complicated with the predator or with genetic variability or stochasticity. Let's do it simple, single species. But instead of writing the equation, I will do just a plot. So we could say, maybe instead of this equation here, I have some other function of n. Okay? This side is a function of n. It's a parabola. And here it's a different. Could be whatever you want. Okay? Could be a sinus of n, a higher order polynomial, exponential of n, something, whatever. Okay? So in principle, you can have other models here, right? Many other models. Now, let us think, and to each of these models, there's a curve, which is the curve of this here. Okay? So I can do the plot of this function by n. Okay? Is this okay? Yeah, I can give you examples if you want more concrete. I have written down some of that are used actually in. Okay. No, I haven't actually written down some that are used, but for instance, one which is actually very important is this function is just r times n times 1 minus n over k times n minus some other constant, okay, which we'll call c. Okay? So this is a third order polynomial. Okay? This is a third order polynomial. Okay? Then you have also something, there are models that use fractions of n divided by 1 over n. There are many models, but they are not anymore so generic as this one. This one is just intraspecific competition. And now, if you modify models, then you have to have usually a biological basis to say why I am modifying the model, and maybe this is not applicable to all situations. We are now thinking about a specific situation where I say, okay, maybe I have to modify my model, and therefore modifying my model is to write some different function on the right-hand side. Okay. Yeah.
Excuse, I just wanted to know if adding the group behavior is still considered intraspecific in like the
group behavior is It's not, well, we cannot, group behavior is group behavior. It's not interspecific competition because it's not competition, okay? It's defensive, okay? So, and this would, if you want, this would be, as you have competition and you have intra and specific and interspecific, you could say that's a kind of, it's a word that I will, I'm thinking now, which I never saw before, would be a kind of intramutualism.
I will rephrase that. Is it still considered single species dynamic?
Ah, okay. So, group behavior is group behavior. The other thing is which model I will use to describe phenomena that are connected to group behavior. And one of the things that you could think is writing a single species. But it could be that you have other models which would not be. Which one will be the best? Usually depends on what is your question about the population. Okay? So it is, for instance, group behavior can be taught being behind the fact that small populations are not viable eventually. And then you can think about this in a single species population. But you can also have models where you explicitly model the group, the species, and say the predator. And then it's not any more single species, then it's two species. Okay? So it's, the group behavior is just the biological fact. The single species dynamics is a way of writing a model. Okay? Just having one focal population. Okay? So now, we want to model something that reflects a biological fact that's for certain populations, not for all, but certain populations, small populations are not viable. Okay? So this is called Ailey effect. I think it has two E's and two L's, maybe. Ailey effect. Okay? There are entire books about Ailey effect. Okay? And so, one way of, if you want to model something that you know, that a population, if it's small, goes extinct, therefore, the point 0 has to be stable. Because if I introduce a small population, it has to go back to 0. Therefore, the 0 must be stable. Okay? And in the here, at this point, the only way, okay, this is dn, which is dn dt, okay? Which is equal to f. The only way of a population at 0 being stable, right, is that the derivative dn dt in near this region is negative, okay? Because I want to introduce a small population. And I say if it's not large enough, but if maybe it's small, it will go extinct, meaning it will go back to the fixed point 0. Okay? Then it has to go this way. But going this way means decreasing. And if you look dn dt, it has to be negative in order for the population to decrease. The derivative has to be negative. Therefore, one way would be the following. Instead of my parabola, I have a modification, which is something like that. Let's now think about it. Here, we have 3 points where dn dt is equal to 0. Yeah? Agree? Okay? Here's the fixed point, which is the 0. Now, I introduce a small perturbation here. What will happen? The derivative is negative. And even if I introduce a larger perturbation, if I start here with a population which has a certain value, which corresponds to this point, negative population, and the negative derivative means that anything that starts below this point goes in this way. Now, anything that starts here at this point has a positive derivative, therefore it will go this way. And then here, it's just the same argument as I had before. Right? I go this way, this way. So I have this one is stable, this one is unstable, and this one is stable. Okay? You have stable, unstable, stable. Now, what's the importance of being stable or unstable? Okay? Unstable fixed points are not observable because there's no such thing as an isolated system or a real single species system which is never perturbed. Always there is some perturbation, either through stochasticity or either through some noise or whatever. There's always some perturbation. Our models are not the perfect image of the population. There's always some perturbation. And you see, when you look at Paulo's course in first class, you make measurements, you have actually some variability of the populations and so on. So it's always under perturbations. So if the fixed point is unstable, you won't see it in nature because it's unstable. Whereas the fixed point is stable, then you probably will see it. Okay? So that's the importance about stability and stability. Okay? Sometimes you look at your system and say, this system will go to a fixed point, but it's only relevant if the fixed point has to be stable. If it's unstable, it's just non-observable. Okay? So this is actually the plot that corresponds to this one. Okay? If n is smaller than c, this term is negative, and all of these things are positive, then it's negative here. Okay? And if n is bigger than c, this is positive, and this is positive, and therefore the NDT is also positive.
So in this case, C is basically a threshold for extinction?
Exactly.
Ah, okay.
So C is minimum population for viability. You can also say that it's a threshold population, which is the minimum population for viability. It's a threshold, yeah. Right. And you see, here, I have not written down the solution. But we are already okay with that, see? Because think a little bit of ecological observations. So again, except microbial ecology, where the thing goes quickly and you don't have a lot of manipulations that you can do, but in general, yeah, ecological systems, it's difficult to observe, say, the whole solution going from one point and going to the other point. Okay, you can do this, for instance, with experiments with flies in a lab, but I mean, in the field, it's usually not the case. Okay, so.
I was actually thinking about this situation, about seeing it in reality. When you consider in reality, you have all different kinds of ecosystems, even if you have the same species in different ecosystems.
Yeah.
So what I think is, in each ecosystem, wouldn't the constant C be different for each of them?
Yeah, could be.
And if you consider, for instance, a human perturbation, such as pollution in a lake, and we consider a species of fishes, wouldn't that make the sea change positions as well.
Yes, this is, you could have as the same thing as for a same species that can have different places can have different carrying capacities. They're rich in nutrients. Places have a higher carrying capacity than situations where you don't have nutrients. Then the sea depends on the place. Decay depends on the environment and the place. And the sea can also be that. For instance, group behavior could be important only under certain circumstances and certain environments.
And time as well, because ecosystems change with time.
Okay, you could also have changes in time. Everything is possible.
Would it be possible to consider time in that equation?
It is. Okay, it is. Okay, it's an interesting point. And not only in this equation, in any of those equations, we have taken all the parameters. Okay, the parameters here are R, K, and C. And we have taken them to be constants. Okay, but sometimes you have things that change in time. So even with Malthus, you could have, for instance, the R depending on time. Maybe it's oscillating. There's reproduction seasons. Then the R is positive. And outside our reproduction systems, R is negative because there's only death. Could be. This could be a periodic function. Okay? So this is called a non-autonomous differential equation. What? Non-autonomous. While these equations we have studied are autonomous. This is a jargon from mathematics only, okay? Autonomous and non-autonomous means autonomous do not have any constants, any time dependence on your parameters. While if you have time dependence on your parameters, it's non-autonomous. And obviously in this case, you could have a problem in doing the qualitative analysis because maybe maybe you don't have a fixed point because it's varying in time, therefore it's not anymore fixed. Okay, but it could be. I mean, there are many ways of analyze this and so on and so on. But I mean, this is not part of our course. But this is very interesting. For instance, there are interesting models. For instance, in epidemiology, even simple models for influenza epidemics, recurring influenza epidemics, and then you say that the probability that the contact between two people, one infected and the other not infected, is usually a certain value, but maybe, for instance, in winter it's a bigger number than in summer. Therefore, you put a periodic function of period 1 year as the modeling the fact that people there's a higher probability of transmission in the winter than in the summer, mainly I mean, this is more for places where you really have winters, okay? So, for instance, then you have the variability, and then, well, then you have to analyze this, and there are many interesting things that come here. So, but you see, again, now, it's interesting that you that you mentioned it, because it is this way that you see that there are many models that can be written. First of all, I'm staying with models that have a very general application, okay? Interspecific competition that exists for many. It's not only animals, it's plants, it's whatever. There are many aspects of. But now, when you go to more specific populations, then you will have to build other types of models. Maybe it's important that in an ecosystem you have a variability in time. Therefore, you have to have non-autonomous systems. And then, okay, and other things also. There exists more species models. There exist some very curious models where the population, then the rate the birth rate now does not depend on the population now, but the population in a certain past time, which could be due to populations where you have a long period to go from juvenile to mature. And if you look at the populations, not all population that had birth now is due to people that had birth, the population sometime earlier. Okay? So this is also something that can be studied. It's called delay differential equations. And they are very difficult. And if you are mathematically minded, I propose to, as a quiz, for you to find the solution of okay, I won't propose anything. Okay. No, because there is a problem with it's not generic. It's something like you have some constant of proportionality here, and then it's n of t minus some tau, which is a delay. And for certain values of lambda and of tau, this can have oscillatory behavior, which is very weird. Okay, because when tau was 0, this is just malthus, it's exponential growth. There's no oscillation at all. Okay, so delays can have importance also. So, but now this again, that we are going out of the realm of generality and going to specific situations, because there are most populations do not have an effect of the delay. But the others have, maybe there are some of them have. It's the same thing, it's not all populations that have Ailey effect. But some of them have, and if you want to have a model for these populations, then you can have something like that here. Okay? So it's not anymore super general. Okay? And one more thing is, yeah, then you obviously could go on and play with all of this. I can make a plot of dn dt, and I won't even care to write down the expression of dn dt. I would just get the plot. Yeah.
Just before you move on, I don't even know if this is a really relevant question, but in the other graph, that is the graph of the derivative, right?
Of the
derivative.
Yes.
How would the growth graph would look like?
But derivative if the growth.
No, sorry, the
n.
Yes.
Ah, okay. N you have to do numerically. That is not solvable analytically. I don't have the expression.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yes.
But I mean, it would be something that would depend. Where is my initial condition? Here, then it's pretty much similar to a logistic, a little bit different, but same form. If it is here, then probably it's exponential decrease. Okay. So you see that the plots I got of the solutions now depend on the initial condition being in a certain range or in another range. Okay? Yeah, I didn't show the solutions. So that's also the point of qualitative analysis. you do the qualitative analysis, you don't show the solution. You analyze the fixed point and you say something very general about what should happen. So I could think of generalized models which describe, I don't know, something else. For instance, like this. You see? And then the game is exactly the same. Here the derivative is negative. If I start here, I go this way. Here the derivative is positive. If I start here, I go this way. Here the derivative is negative, it goes this way. Here the derivative is positive, it goes this way. Here it goes again this way. Okay? Therefore, this is stable. This one is unstable. This one is stable. This one is unstable. This one is stable. And this one is unstable. It is a succession of stable, unstable, stable, unstable fixed points. And this is very particular to single species dynamics. It's not at all connected to more species. So single species dynamics with autonomous systems and no time delay and so on are just single fixed points. Therefore, this kind of systems, even if I put a super complicated function here, will never show patterns of anything different than fixed points. And we know in nature there's not only fixed points, therefore we will have to have other models. But this single species models are not able to describe more complicated patterns. It's always stable, unstable, stable, unstable. Okay? Here, I didn't even care to write the equation. The equation is the equation of this curve, which is with this kind of thing is probably something enormous. Okay? But you can think about it only graphically. You can think that this is a way of writing graphically a differential equation. And I say dn dt and as a function of n, okay? Which is a differential equation. And so, no really great fun with this, okay? So now I want to ask you the following question. Okay, so that's all for the math now, okay? And I'm giving you also the reason that we won't stay with the single species dynamics anymore, okay? Because it's pretty much more or less trivial.
I would just like to know, it's kind of two questions. Is independent of the amount of fixed points, will K always be the last of them?
No.
And will it always be stable?
No. No. So, okay. Here I'm of a very general thing that you could even think, is there something like K? Okay, in some sense, okay, thinking about it, for any biological situation, at the last fixed point should be stable. Because otherwise, say here in this situation, the last fixed point is unstable, yes? Okay? Then it goes away. But it goes away, there's no fixed point. Here it goes to infinity, okay? And there's no such thing as an infinite population. So the last one should be stable. In any minimally realistic model, it has to be stable. There's no what people call escape to infinity.
But it not necessarily needs to be K, that point.
So dependent in this case, it depends how you want to define K. If K is defined not mathematically, but as the largest sustainable population, then it's K. Okay? Because if the fixed point is stable, if anything after that bigger than it, we'll have a negative derivative and go back to K. Well, then you can call it carrying capacity if you want, okay? Not more or less generalized form, okay?
It's because the way I'm thinking, usually in biology, when we study ecology of populations, we usually understand that all populations tends to K.
Yeah.
But if you have, for instance, a fixed stable point after K, for instance, would that be possible?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem with finding what's the carrying capacity. If you say the carrying capacity in a certain place, in a certain environment, is the largest possible population that is stable, that's viable, then the last one is K. Okay, through this definition. But in this case, see, that's the here you have many fixed points, and if you start, say here, you won't go to K. You'll go to this one, okay? You stop here, okay? Although it's possible to go to have it here, there's some obstacle to reaching the carrying capacity, okay?
It's because you said that it depends on the definition of K. The one you gave us just now is the only one I know. Is there another?
There's a mathematical definition, okay? So, and here you have, and it's maximum sustainable population. It's the normal definition, but you could think mathematically maybe something like this. If here, I mean, I'm drawing just a weird plot, okay? But if you start here, you never attain carrying capacity. You attain something intermediate value, okay? That's the only definition, but the only thing is that maybe there are situations where you cannot reach the carrying capacity. When you start with, for instance, as we had here before. If you start here, you don't reach the carrying capacity at the end of the day. Okay? You go to 0. Okay? So you could have more and more fixed points, which would mean that depends where you start, where's your initial condition, you go to the carrying capacity or not. So it's not only, it is the maximum, but it's not necessarily attainable. So now, okay. Okay, more questions.
I was trying to think of this graph in a biological way. That third fixed point wouldn't be the carrying capacity, because how will the size of the population just jump from...
No, it won't. But that's what I'm trying to explain. What is carrying capacity? If carrying capacity is defined in a situation, in a certain place, the maximum attainable population is the carrying capacity, okay? Then you'd say the last one should be a... Then you say this is the carrying capacity. But there's an association in many textbooks on ecology because of the logistic equations, which only has 2 fixed points, 0 and K, to believe that you will always attain the carrying capacity independent of where you start with the population. So here, that would be an example that you cannot attain the carrying capacity because you have other fixed points here. And in this case here, that would be even simpler. If I start here, I do not increase to the carrying capacity. I go to 0. So when you have this kind of, you have more than one fixed point, okay, you have 2 fixed points, then you can have, maybe you will reach the carrying capacity, maybe not, depending on your initial condition. Okay, so that's the point. And this is relevant when you have more than one stable fixed point. That's called a bistable. Bistable because you have 2 here, or multistable. But people don't say multistable; they say bistable, even if it's not 2 fixed points.
Could you show the graph?
Yep.
please? I guess what's like kind of bothering me or like what I'm not understanding is that in that graph, the total number of individuals, right, it just goes up. And
yeah, okay, so I just modified it, okay? Because the last one has to be stable.
no, yeah, it will stop at some point.
Yeah.
But in that graph, it only goes up. And in reality, it can go up and down.
Now, here is n, not t.
Right,
If I start here, it goes down because dn dt is 0. In this region, it goes down. In this region, it goes increases. In this one, it decreases. In this one, it increases, depending on the sign of the derivative. Okay?
No.
The population is not, this is not time. This is n. Okay? I'm not plotting the solutions of the equations. But here, if I start here, with a population which has a certain number of individuals here, the derivative is negative, therefore the population is decreasing. Yeah, you can start at any point, this is your initial condition, and then you will go to some fixed point.
And then also the carrying
No, no,
the carrying capacity can also change like in reality, right? So
like change in which way?
the carrying capacity of environments, like they change. I mean, they have perturbations and then they change.
Okay, but this is something that cannot be explained by this plot. But the carrying capacity being time dependent, then you cannot do this point because the fixed point is not anymore fixed because it's time dependent.
Thinking about this graph in a biological point of view, we would consider that we would only reach another stable point if we had like migration or something.
If you have a perturbation that takes you to say you are here, okay, and so you can only go here. But then there's a perturbation. Maybe you are close to this point, but a perturbation goes and kicks you up to this point. A big perturbation, not a small anymore, right? So, for instance, this is relevant for what we will discuss at the end of the course about desertification. Because you have regions where you have vegetation cover, and then you have the process of desertification. And actually, what happens is that when you go to, say you have a decrease of rainfall, and then you go to a situation where it's you become a desert or almost desert, okay? And then the rainfall comes back and stays a desert, okay? So they have two fixed points, desert and vegetation cover, and depends on if you have a lot of vegetation, maybe you don't go to the desert, but if you don't have enough, you go to the desert. So this is a situation that we will discuss in the last week.
Could one stable point be more stable than other?
No, there's no such thing. I mean, it depends what you would say more stable. So you could say the following. Here, which points are attracted to this one, okay? So all of these ones go here. Therefore, all of this goes there. This one, all of these points here, I mean, not this, these and this, okay? These points go this. So there is a larger region that is attracted to this point than the region of this one, okay? So this has a name. This here, this region, that goes to this point, it is because this point is a stable fixed point, and then in this case we also say that it's an attractor. It goes this way, This region is called basin of attraction. Bacia de atração. Basin of attraction. So this basin of attraction is smaller than the basin of attraction of this one. And this one has also a quite impressive, this one here has a certain basin of attraction and so on. So you can talk about the basin of attraction. And if you want, you could think about how fast do I go if I perturb my system and I go back to the fixed point, the stable fixed point, how fast do I go? And this can be different for different fixed points. Okay. So we have 5 minutes. But I want to ask you the question that I wanted to ask you is, okay, we have single species here, okay? But you could say there's no such thing as a single species. Species interact, okay? So my question is there a situation that you can imagine where dynamics of your focal species is well described approximately as a single species? In which situations could you think this would be the case? These are single species, only one focal. But the dynamics of species depend on interaction with species. Okay? So the point is, can there be situations where you have interactions actually, but still describing your focal species by a single species model is approximately good?
Maybe when resources are available. When resources are available and competition is like small.
Okay, so this is actually saying that they are not, the interaction is very small. Okay, so I have a lot of resources and you have, say, a competitor for this resource is another species, and maybe this species or either is a bad competitor or there's so much resources that the competition is actually not relevant. Okay, but you know, this has also a problem because if there are lots of resources and then you have two species, then the population are increasing, and there will be a point that the resources are not anymore. So the environment is not rich enough, and then you have competition coming in. Okay. Okay, then you.
So the question is if we consider more than one species, right?
Yeah. If a model of one on a single species, which is a thing that does not exist.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a single species. But can this be a model, approximate model for some situation?
Yeah, I guess a species is just a taxonomical unit, and a species is just a taxonomic unit. So if we consider species as functional groups instead of taxonomic groups, and they have the same birth and death rates.
Meta-species, okay, yeah, it's a meta-species, okay, functional group. And if you want a functional group from the point of view of population biology, you are taking a lot of species and saying it's the same population.
Yeah.
And this can be relevant, depends on functional group.
Well,
okay.
but I guess if they have the same birth and death rates, need the same resources, and are affected by the same environmental variables, we could consider a single species.
But I mean, if this functional species does not interact with other functional group, okay?
Okay.
You could say that it's not connected to other functional groups. So it's a kind of answer that is okay. It's not a species; it's a functional group. But it's somehow isolated. And then what I wanted you to think about is there a situation where the species are not isolated, where the single species still can be a good idea? And do you want to? No, okay. So, more ideas. You have 1 minute.
Maybe bacterias? Bacterias.
Okay, bacteria on a petri dish, but it's again isolated.
I'm not a biologist, so maybe this doesn't make sense, but if the species have different niches and like they're in the same space but they don't interact, they don't interfere much.
Yeah, okay, but they don't interact.
That's cheating, right?
Still, that's still thing isolated in
That's
the
true.
thing.
I think for invasive species, because they have no predators and no competition.
Yeah, sometimes that it's true, but again, it's isolated in the sense that it just invades. And, okay, some situation it invades, it obviously has to have the resources, and usually the invasions are such that because the invasive species finds resources. And yeah, then it's a more or less single species in the sense that when you have an invasion, sometimes there are species that feed on the resources that are there, but the invader is such a better competitor that they more or less don't even notice these other species which will be kind of eliminated. So this happened here, for instance, in Brazil with the African blowflies. Okay, they just invaded as a single population, and the Brazilian blowfly disappeared.
Would it be the case where one species is like attached to another, like in mutualism or parasite host systems?
So it's no. So the point is, okay, we have to finish that. But the point is, single species dynamics surprisingly can be relevant if you have a lot of interactions. So say there's a species here. And the species is a specialist that feeds only on another species. In this case, you cannot have a single species dynamics because they are totally connected. Okay? But now say I have a certain species here, which is a generalist, can have many other species. So it feeds from other species, many other species. Okay? So maybe it's not important to know the other species, but there will always be some, okay? And then all of this only at the end will be a carrying capacity. And the same thing, maybe this guy here. So is prey of other species, but not of only one, okay? Say, for instance, the one of the examples of this kind of thing is trophic networks in the Arctic, where there are so many species, and that they are more simple in the very cold regions, and you have the hare, okay? The Arctic hare, which feeds upon plants or so. And it is prey to the lynx, but also to wolves, and also for raccoons or small falcons that prey upon the small individuals of hares. So many of them. Therefore, if you have a lot of connections, the importance of each one is not so big. And then maybe you will behave as a single species, because you have so many connections that none of them is actually very essential. And then you can maybe be modeled by a single species. Okay, so that's it for single species dynamics in continuous time. Tomorrow we go to discrete time. Thank you.
Já estava sem bateria.